Good morning, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Sean Egan. I am the Director of COVID Workplace Safety for the state of Michigan, as well as the Deputy Director for Labor in Michigan's Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. That includes oversight of MIOSHA, the Workers' Disability Compensation Agency, the Bureau of Employment Relations, and the Wage and Hour Division. I appreciate the opportunity to do a quick intro and share some information with you this morning as you start part 2 of accommodating employees during COVID-19. Throughout this virus, one of the things that I like to remind everybody is that while we have a 24/7 news cycle and there's a lot of information and noise around COVID-19, some factors have remained pretty much unchanged, and that includes how important it is to social distance, practice good hygiene, and wear face coverings when we can't maintain that social distance. Certainly today, you're going to be talking about some of those accommodating techniques that you may be able to use for those folks that are medically unable to wear face covering, and we all understand that. But certainly, if you can, you should. We believe, or some of the science tells us, that the virus seems to spread pretty well from asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic people, which are those folks that will never get sick or they currently feel fine. And wearing face coverings can reduce transmission by maybe 70% or more. So if we're both wearing these face coverings, if we're able, that will really help us contain the numbers and the spread of COVID across the state of Michigan. I can tell you that our folks in MIOSHA, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, have been working hard throughout this crisis. Our complaints are up about 500%, and they're responding in due course. Most of those are related to COVID. Some are certainly more routine matters within workplaces. We have developed a great tool and resource for everybody that is michigan.gov/COVID workplace safety, which includes guidelines for every industry that's been named in an executive order, as well as general industry guidelines for those that have not. The site includes flyers and posters, fact sheets and other tools. They're available in alternative languages, as well as accessible tools to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get those. The MIOSHA team also created a hotline, which is 855-SAFE-C19, that can be used by employers and employees with questions related to COVID in the workplace. It'll help employers navigate many of the challenges and different dynamics of the executive orders, including those guidelines that I mentioned. And feel free to call that number anytime you have a question about what you could or should be doing in your workplace. And the same for employees. If they have questions about what their employer is doing or need to just kind of understand more clearly what the expectations are, I would encourage everybody to call 855-SAFE-C19 to talk directly with MIOSHA folks. The average wait time is about 15 seconds, and the average call is about 4 to 5 minutes, depending on the issues there. I'm very glad today to be able to introduce a good friend and the president of the Michigan Small Business Association of Michigan and former Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, who has been a great ally and asset for businesses and employees throughout this crisis. And I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you enjoy this continued discussion on accommodating employees during COVID.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sean, for that generous introduction and summary and all the work that's being done by the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. We at the Small Business Association of Michigan, well, actually, let me stop and say I'm Brian Calley, president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And it's a pleasure to be with you today and with this all-star panel of experts to talk about ADA and the workplace and in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday's first part of this seminar has provided a lot of great information, and there's a ton of information we still need to follow up on with respect to questions. We've got a lot of really interesting and impactful questions to address today as well. So a few things I wanted to cover just by way of housekeeping. Yesterday's session, if you missed it, is available on the YouTube page, or actually if you want to find anything from yesterday's session, go to michigan.gov/ADA30 That is up on the slide right now. That website, yesterday's information and today's information will all be found there. If you want to go back and refer to it, or if you missed yesterday's session and want to take a look, you'll find the links there. And also the chat box will remain closed until we get to the point in the presentation where we are taking questions. We'll give you some warning when that's coming up, so you can think of your questions and submit them through the chat box as well. But it'll be closed between now and then. During that, when we get to that point though, when we're opening the chat box for questions, only registered participants will be able to submit questions to the chat box. So if you're registered in Zoom, you'll have access to that chat box, and you can do it a couple of different ways. First, you could just type it into the chat box itself, or if you're using the phone or audio options, there's the raise the hand option, or press *9 if using the phone, and we can call on you or get you in line to ask the question. We always have the disclaimer that any inappropriate or threatening language will not be tolerated. We do have the ability to mute, not afraid to use it, but I know that won't be a problem. Also, if you need more information regarding the accessibility features of Zoom, it depends on what type of device you're using. So what we've done is provided the link there if you need a little bit of insight into what is available. And so you'll see the link and the 800 number that is up on the screen. Please feel free to use that. And now I'd like to introduce the panel of guests. I'd already introduced myself, Brian Kelly, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. I know we at the association greatly appreciate the ability to partner with these state agencies on bringing a lot of important information to employers about their responsibilities with respect to the Americans with Disabilities Act and other laws, rules, and guidelines that need to be followed to ensure that we have the best possible outcome for employers and employees. I'll also say that this is, I'm doing this from my home for the first time ever, and I have kids and a dog, and they don't always respect my privacy. So I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I'm sure everybody will understand because you're all in the same situation. So here's our panel today. Lolita Davis is the Outreach and Training Coordinator for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and she is on our panel today. Again, Lolita, hi, hello.
Good morning, everybody.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. And next up is Kim Woolridge, who is the Director of the State ADA Compliance Division in the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Hello, Kim.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Jenny Pyatt, who is the Bureau Division Director in the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, good morning, Brian. Thank you. Jenny Pyatt.
Good morning. And next up, we have Bill Robinson, who is the Director of the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Brian. It's great to be here again. This is Bill Robinson.
And last but not least is Annie Uraski, who is the Director of the Division on Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. Annie.
Hello, good to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here.
All right, excellent. So we've got everybody up now and introduced. Let's just get into these questions. We had quite a lively discussion yesterday, and it was one that brought a lot of important information for employers to know and to understand. Some of these questions here, we're going to get into some pretty sensitive areas, and I can tell you because I deal with employers all the time that oftentimes these are sensitive enough issues to where they're kind of afraid of what questions they can ask, what things that they can do, and especially when you get to a place of confrontation. So the question number one is, how can employees be fired or disciplined for refusing to come to work if they have tested positive for COVID-19 or are exhibiting symptoms? What if it is only a member of their household who has tested positive for COVID-19 or is exhibiting symptoms? So who would like to take this one? Let's start with Lolita Davis.
Hi, Lolita Davis here. I just wanted to say that the EEOC has not addressed whether COVID-19 is with COVID-19 as an individual with a disability, are they covered under the ADA? So first of all, COVID-19 right now is not a disability. So we would not have an issue with this particular, if the person was fired or discharged, but you do have the executive order in place to cover that, or even the First Family COVID Response Act to cover that, but we wouldn't, right now, is not classified as a disability. So, but you still want to be mindful. You still want to make sure your people feel comfortable to come back to work, and that you just, based on these other acts and executive orders, it just will protect you from any legal issues, future legal issues.
Okay, thank you. And I think did Kim have something to add there? I thought I may have saw your hand rise.
This is Kim speaking. Lolita said it all. You have the Governor Whitmer's executive order that covers it, Executive Order 2002-36 that covers that, and under state law, and the Families First Coronavirus Act under federal law that could provide some prohibitions or problems for an employer if they attempted to do that.
And Bill Robinson.
Thank you. This is Bill speaking. There's actually a great couple fact sheets that are on the Wage and Hour Division site for U.S. Wage and Hour Division, and you can find it on the Department of Labor site as well. And it goes through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So it states that employers must provide to all employees 2 weeks of paid sick leave and some other rights in there, and you can't have retribution as a result. But what's interesting in here too is there is a tax credit that's available to employers for providing that leave, and it's a dollar for dollar credit. So even though that sounds like a cost, ultimately businesses would get that money back.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Bill. And I'll go now to Lolita Davis.
Hi, Lolita. And it's important for employers to read the executive orders, the Family First COVID Response Act, so that you are aware of what your obligations are, because with the executive order, there are some exceptions in there where people with symptoms having the symptoms, like hospital staff, first responders, they wouldn't be covered under this act. So it's just really important for employers. The resources are there and available, but you want to make sure that you read it. And then knowing how much leave to give a person, how many employees that are covered, because with the ADA, so you have to have the 15 employees. I think with the Family First COVID Response Act, what is it covering? What employers with like 500 employees or something like that. So it's just important to know what's out there.
And why don't I go ahead and just give a little bit of, since we've talked about several different laws and acts and executive orders. So Brian Kelly, Small Business Association of Michigan speaking here. And so you have the executive order, which clearly says you can't fire somebody who has COVID-19 and doesn't come to work. And so so you have the executive order. You do have the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is the federal act, which says the same. So it's not classified as a disability under ADA, but it is still prohibited to fire somebody because they didn't come to work after testing positive for the coronavirus or for COVID-19. As Bill Robinson had mentioned, there is a mandated benefit for employers with employees fewer than 500 employees that you give 2 weeks paid sick leave and also extended family medical leave under certain circumstances if somebody's caring for somebody who has COVID-19 as well as they themselves. And so there is a tax credit dollar for dollar. This right now, that law goes through the end of this year, December 31st this year. And then it will, at that point, either be extended, renewed, or will expire. We really don't know what will happen to it. But in the meantime, there is a tax credit available. You do not have to wait until you file your tax return to get it. You can actually do it on your, you can withhold it out of your withholding taxes that you pay regularly from your regular payroll services. So just a little bit more insight on that. So the answer to this question would be no, you can't, not because of the ADA, but because of other executive orders and laws. All right, very good. Well, let's move on to question number 2, and that is, can employees be fired or disciplined for refusing to come to work in order to protect themselves or a high-risk family member of their immediate household from being exposed to COVID-19? All right, let's start with Bill Robinson this time.
Okay, thank you. This is Bill Robinson speaking. I just wanted to state that what OSHA says is an employee generally does not have the right to refuse work merely because of potential unsafe condition in the workplace. However, they can refuse if the employer has failed to eliminate a hazard in the workplace, or there's a good faith belief that imminent danger exists, or a reasonable person would agree there's real danger and there is no time posted by the employer to get the hazard corrected. So I want to point out that what this means is it's very important to follow the Safe Start plan that both the Small Business Association has put out there in conjunction with Labor and Economic Opportunity, and under Deputy Director Egan's group has put out there, because by documenting your plan, you're able to show that the employee does not have the right to refuse to come to work because you have provided those safeguards. So it's very important to have that plan documented, posted on your website. I think it's important too, if somebody is hesitant or calls and says, I don't want to come to work, I'm feeling very hesitant. Of course, we all have investments in employees and we don't want to lose good employees. You can do almost the same as you did with the ADA requirement with that interactive process. Walk them through your plan, explain the safeguards, help them understand why it's safe to return to work. And also for a person with a particular disability that may have a high anxiety level, again, you may have to get into that interactive process and talk to them about those safeguards, walk them through that plan, and make sure they understand and have that level of anxiety that can come down because you're giving them assurance that you're going to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Did you have something to add, Jenny?
Hi, thanks, Brian. Jenny Pyatt again. No, he just hit on every talking point I was just going to mention. So well done, Bill. Yeah, again, just emphasizing the interactive process and so that it's not interpreted as retaliation. I think that's really important. Another, legal term that sometimes is also thrown out there. And again, as you mentioned, the OSHA, both OSHA and ADA, I think really kind of cover this this particular point with relation to that process, and that it's a case-by-case basis. We can't just kind of broad brush, and it's important to have that dialogue with the employee and letting them know what other alternatives are out there too, with respect to, if it's the traditional PPEs that are being provided, maybe there's some alternatives that could be looked at for that employee too. Thanks.
Yeah, great insight. And I appreciate, this is Brian Kelly, Small Business Association of Michigan. And as a reminder too, we want to make this as inclusive as possible. So we're reintroducing ourselves in case somebody has a disability where they're not able to easily identify who it is that's talking. I appreciate Bill with the shout out to the COVID-19 response and preparedness plan and template that our association has put out, the Small Business Association of Michigan. We did that open source, so it's available to anybody to use, and it's a really great starting document for putting a plan in place. Now, employees do not have the right to refuse to come to work simply because they're afraid of the virus, but employers do have a responsibility to follow all the rules and the safeguards. And so one of the things that we had recommended, which is not a requirement of the executive order, but still a great practice, is to involve your employees in developing your COVID-19 response and preparedness plan. In other words, give them ownership and some experience in understanding what the safeguards are. And they don't have to trust that you thought of everything. They were really a part of the process of developing your preparedness plan in the first place. And it's been a great tool. It's been used by thousands and thousands of businesses across the state, and we've had some great feedback on it. So I'd invite you at sbam.org. You can find that as well. And it goes through and it's a compliance document, but it's also a very practical document to take the rules and executive orders and laws and put them into the type of context of your business that hopefully you'll find very, very useful. Okay, any last thoughts on Lolita Davis?
Lolita Davis, EEOC. I just wanted to piggyback on that because that just goes to, you make them feel comfortable, you make them feel part of the process, so they will want to come back to the workplace if you have those safety measures in place.
Excellent. Okay, now question number 3. An employer requires returning workers to wear personal protective gear and engage in infection control practices. Employees may ask for accommodations due to a need for modified protective gear. Must an employer grant these requests? Let's start with Kim.
So an employer under OSHA is Kim speaking. An employer under OSHA is required to provide PPE at the employer's cost to prevent hazardous conditions in the workplace. So an employer is required to provide PPE. And if the employee is a person with a disability, under the ADA and state law, the employer has a duty to provide a reasonable accommodation to that employee. So if the alternative PPE is reasonable, yes, the employer would have to provide an alternative form of PPE to that employee as a reasonable accommodation.
Jenny.
Thanks, Brian. Again, Jenny Pite with Michigan Rehab Services. Spot on, Kim. And again, it's going back to not a one size fits all with the PPEs. I think we talked yesterday about some of the alternatives in terms of like face masks, some of the clear face masks that are out there versus the standard cloth. And just understanding that, again, going back to that, having that dialogue, having that communication, because every workplace and again, every situation we know is so fluid right now. So all the more reason just to continue to have the conversation and discuss. And again, we always try to emphasize, ask the employee themselves too. Sometimes, you know, the employer feels the burden that they have to find the solution and it's up to them to find the answer. More often than not, employees oftentimes have really good ideas, and their peers, you know, their colleagues or coworkers also have good ideas too, and how to maybe implement or approach, you know, the situation. So, you know, don't hesitate to actually ask the employee, what are your thoughts? What do you think? You know, I think about, you know, again, just with respect to how to do things differently. We worked more recently with a retailer. It was a customer service associate position. And so you can imagine he's, you know, having interaction with customers on a regular basis. This is an essential kind of function here that he's doing. This is an individual with hearing loss. And of course, the mask wasn't working for him as far as that cloth mask and being able to interact with the public. Fortunately, employees, the employer all purchased the clear mask so that the employee could communicate with their colleagues within the retail store. But as far as the customer coming in and using a traditional face mask, a really great solution they came up with was a mic system. So the individual used what's called an FM system that was connected to his hearing aid and had a small mic on his desk or his counter area for individuals to be able to talk, and he could hear them better using that system. If that didn't work, then what the alternative was asking the customer, do you mind, can we go over to this area here where there's an actual plexiglass shield? And then that way the customer could pull their mask down and allow the employee to actually read lips and understand better what the customer was saying. So again, it was an excellent approach in terms of, you know, the employer, the customer looking at alternatives, and some of our, you know, the expertise that between Bill Robinson and Annie's group and Kim and our agency, Michigan Rehab Services, were able to help that business identify some of those solutions.
That's a great point, Jenny, and a reminder that that all the people that are represented on this call here have agencies and divisions that they're not just enforcers of rules, but actually problem solvers. And so I do want to encourage everybody watching to take note and reach out, to form a relationship with these agencies, because chances are any problem that you have that you can't quite figure out, that they've seen it and dealt with it before. Annie, you're asking.
Hi, this is Annie speaking. Jenny really made the point wonderful. She gave a great example. And again, yesterday we talked a little bit, and I want to stress again today that those cloth masks are a huge barrier for deaf, blind, and hard of hearing residents. With all of the stress and thinking about, you know, what my experience could be like if I went back to work, and, you know, maybe the employer doesn't understand, or even the coworkers don't understand my need, that's a very stressful situation to be in. So again, we just want to stress that interactive process. Ask the employee, what solutions do you have? What thoughts do you have? What options have you come up with? Let them be a part of the process. And I have an example of the clear mask with me today, so you can see what those look like. And it's interesting. We got some information from different employees and employers who were trying to, you know, to work within their company to figure out what accommodations would be successful. And many employers made the assumption that, oh, I'm going to have to buy clear masks for all of my employees, for the entire company, for all the customers who walk in the door that interact with our business. And that is, you know, that's an unreasonable expectation. We can't expect business owners to be able to afford that expense. But it's really more about interacting with people that I am going to be interacting with. So we can develop solutions for that. One of them is a whiteboard. I mean, that's a really great way if a customer comes in and you need to communicate with them and you're looking for an alternative solution, being able to write back and forth on a whiteboard. Also, we see like people that download a speech to text app or any other kind of assistive technology. You can find some very creative solutions to these situations. But again, it's not a one size fits all. And for me personally, as a deaf person, I tend to tune into and tune my needs into the environment that I'm in. So based on who I'm interacting with, where I am, I make that accommodation, but it's important. And I want to stress to those employers, please get involved in that interactive process. The last thing you want to do is make an assumption that might not be right. So you can look for those creative solutions, but just work together and really just understand that we have to adjust. This is a different environment. It's all new. So, but if you ask questions, you can figure it out. I also want to mention that for the Michigan businesses who feel like, oh, I need a specific kind of PPE and I'm not sure where to go, I'm not sure what resources are out there, the MEDC has a PPE portal that will connect any Michigan business that, maybe needs to, there's Michigan businesses that have modified their manufacturing processes to make these PPEs instead. So it can help make those connections. So if you have a deaf, blind, or hard of hearing employee, there's companies that have developed face shields that can be a good option. There's gloves, there's a lot of other options. And depending on what you might need in your industry. So I do recommend, if you have an employee who's deaf, blind, or hard of hearing, look for an anti-fog clear face shield. That's a really good option. That's something to consider. All right, thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Annie. Lolita?
Hi, Lolita Davis. Thanks, Annie, for that information. But just like with the deaf and hard of hearing community, individuals with respiratory issues, those cloth masks will not work because it does impact their ability to breathe. And so we did talk a little bit yesterday about the shield and just, again, having that conversation. And then when it even comes to the disinfectants that you use for people with allergies and respiratory issues, but think about purchasing unscented chemical, wipes or something, because that also helps those individuals with fragrance sensitivity. I mean, for example, right when we were told that we were going to be teleworking, we had one day to get everything out of the office. And I grabbed some scented wipes and immediately had a migraine. So just thinking about those little things also help. Unscented products will just purchase those too.
Okay, excellent. Well, some great examples and great resources. Don't forget that the people on this call are resources in addition to sources of information. Jenny.
Thanks, Brian. Jenny Pite again from Michigan Rehab Services. Okay, so not to be the skunk at the garden party here either. Again, I kind of want to give another scenario that some of our business partners on the line or have experienced this. If you are a business and you do have patrons coming in that refuse to wear a mask, that's a really difficult situation. And I think everybody on this panel, very inclusive of Brian too, can appreciate the challenges sometimes with those crucial situations when someone's walking in the door and having to de-escalate. I think it's important to mention that there is a lot of social media out there and what I want to call like fake cards, if you will, that are claiming that's from Department of Justice, that is claiming, I particular medical condition, so I don't have to wear a mask. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there's information out there that's not accurate. And again, the intent here is that the ADA only protects individuals with disabilities, that you cannot throw it out there just to say, well, hey, and not to diminish at all Lolita's point about respiratory, there are very serious medical conditions out there that are very valid. We also have a very small population though that decide, I'm going to use that as a reason not to have to wear my mask because I don't want to wear a mask. So I think it's important to mention that too, where businesses might feel a little, just feeling caught kind of in the middle between all of the rules and the regs. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind is just asking the questions and, well, could we find an alternative way to help support you? Maybe we can, come over here and like I gave the example of someone coming over where there's plexiglass and other PPEs available to have an interaction with the customer. So I think it's always just trying to kind of pause and ask, how can I best serve you and still be mindful of our current conditions and what's happening and protecting my employees and myself in that process. Thank you.
All right, I think Kim was first and then I'll get right back to Lolita.
Hi, Kim speaking from Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I wanted to mention that some employers may have a question about providing PPE, especially when employees are working from home, and OSHA has some guidance on their website. There's a difference between a home office and home manufacturing, and generally they would only have to provide that PPE when it's home manufacturing. That's a generality. Business owners should go to the website to attain more information. And I also wanted to mention that there's a distinction between providing PPE and providing an accommodation. So although employees are working from home, an employer still would have to provide a reasonable accommodation to employees who have a qualified disability. Thank you.
All right, Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC. Yes, thanks, Kim, for that, because they do have to provide those reasonable accommodation. But what Jenny was saying, you know, you may not want to wear a mask, but you have to think about others. You know, like, I want my family to be safe. I want everybody to be safe. So even with those respiratory issues, I keep my mask on, and I may run in and out of the store because of those breathing issues, but it's not just about you. It's about the safety and the health of your employees, your family members, and everybody else.
Yeah, this is Brian Kelly, and you know this. If I could even just kind of step out, got a role as running a business association, but also I have a daughter with a disability, and I must say that the way that people have kind of used or claimed disability status to exempt themselves from rules is something that is very concerning for people who actually have disabilities. The idea of diluting the importance of things like accommodations, and so I just as a personal plea, it would be don't claim a disability just to try and get out of something that you don't want to do. That it's just not right. It's against the law too, but it's just not right morally to do so. And so there's a you know, the executive order does give an ability for, on the customer side, for that customer to claim or explain that they have a condition, that it could be a medical condition or disability that prevents them from wearing a mask. Now the business has a decision to make at that point. Because of the direct threat issue, you do not have to allow entrance, but you may allow entrance. But you don't have to do it under the same terms. You could provide other alternatives. Curbside service for retail business, for example, is an example of an acceptable alternative or accommodation that could be made. It could be something like a face shield, for example, as an option. So there are options in terms of, on the customer side, you may allow admittance of a customer who claims a medical condition or a disability, but you don't have to. And so that's for COVID-19, I mean, in this pandemic environment. So the other thing I wanted to point out too, because we got a little bit into customers versus employees. With employees, there are some, I'd encourage you to take a look at Executive Order 161, which is the Workplace Safety Executive Order. And there are rules. Not every employee needs to wear a face covering all the time. It depends which industry and what situation that they're in that industry. So I'd encourage you to maybe re-review the most recent generation, Executive Order 161. So and that it'll have each section on your area, and it'll say what the requirements for use of PPE for your employees are. And you might be surprised. It might not be as much as you think. So sometimes you see the public discussion is a little bit more, people imagine the rules to be different than what the rules actually are. Okay, well, let's move on to question number 4. Do employers need to provide personal protective equipment or other protective accommodations to staff or service providers such as ASL interpreters who are assisting employees with disabilities. So this is, we know that employers have to provide PPE to employees. Do employers have to provide PPE for those that are helping with accommodations such as ASL interpreters? Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC. Yes, they do. And it's really important now, this new normal with Zoom and all of these virtual meetings, that the ASL interpreters are provided so that the individuals can participate in the training just like anyone else.
Okay, Annie.
Hi, this is Annie speaking. I wanted to give one specific example that I think represents this well. Many individuals who are deafblind or if they use ASL, if they use sign language, deafblind specifically are required to have close contact, which means they have to have an interpreter that uses tactile or haptics. And what that means is they might have a support service provider, which we call an SSP, that helps them navigate their environment. Close contact means you can't stay 6 feet apart. You can't socially distance. It's just not possible. So you're going to have to, in those situations, provide appropriate PPE for the SSP or the interpreter. And it's interesting because we're noticing that many people in the deafblind community, and of course, there's individual preferences, but they tend to have a better experience with the face shield. But again, some of them, clear masks are okay. It depends on the degree of their vision loss. And then of course you have, to match that individual's need for accommodation. And because of that close contact, the interpreter is going to need gloves, probably a gown if necessary, whatever the appropriate PPE is, but likely not just a mask or a shield. And I also wanted to add something else. When you are working as an interpreter, you are also interacting with many, many deafblind and hard of hearing individuals. So when you think about providing PPE, it is also important to think about making sure the interpreter stays safe for the next person, for the next job, the next consumer that they're going to be interacting with. It's not just thinking about right now, this current situation. You have to think about the ongoing safety for the next person that they're going to be around. So I would recommend, yes, this is an important discussion to have for the interpreter themselves, for the deafblind and hard of hearing individuals, and what they need when it comes to interpreting services as well.
Okay, excellent. Bill Robinson.
Thank you, Annie, for that. I totally agree with everything you said. This is Bill Robinson again speaking, and that was an excellent overview. In addition, for blind individuals, severely visually impaired, there may be a reader driver that's provided as an accommodation depending on the circumstances. And again, those close contacts are unavoidable. So there may be additional PPE that's required for a reader that's working with a blind individual, or in the case of a driver to make sure that they have specific protocols for protecting each other against the spread of COVID.
So thank you, Bill. So maybe if I could see if I could summarize or boil this down. So the answer would be, yes, you do have to provide PPE to a person who is providing accommodation services for one of your employees. And then in to the extent that that accommodation does include close personal contact, it really is just a matter of this going back to that interactive process. You've got some preferences that people might have in terms of what is needed, but think of that the person who's providing the accommodation services as like an extension of your employee, And so whatever you would do to provide, or whatever you would have to provide to your employee in terms of accommodations and personal protective equipment, the person who's providing the accommodation would be entitled to the same personal protective equipment protections. Okay. All right, well, let's move on to question 5. We've got just a few more to get to here, and then I want to get to the point where people who are watching can ask some questions as well. COVID-19 and its effects, such as prolonged isolation, temporary layoffs, et cetera, have taken a toll on the mental health of employers and employees. Are employers allowed to offer assistance or resources to employees exhibiting signs of stress, emotional instability, or other mental health related symptoms? Let's start with Kim this time.
Kim Woolridge with Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And an employer, if they can specifically identify behavior and articulate that behavior, can send an employee for a fitness for duty test. However, without being able to specifically identify and articulate behavior, the best thing that an employer can do, because I think we're probably all to some degree suffering from, prolonged signs of exhibiting stress, emotional instability, and other mental health related issues right now. Put a general email out to all employees, telling them about whatever programs that the employer may have. Like, I know the state of Michigan has the Employee Services Program, ESP, where they can obtain assistance if they like, but you send it as a general email to all employees, not targeting one or two specific employees.
Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC, and that's the same thing that we do, Kim, at the federal level. They'll send out a general email about EAP. We work with the Federal Executive Board. The Federal Executive Board will send out a general email if people need resources like food and, you know, some of the PPEs, they will direct them where to go, or, you know, for to help them cope, how to cope during this time, because the isolation for some people, you know, this is really a difficult time for them right now. So a general type message instead of singling someone out, unless they come to you and say that they're having this issue, then you may can direct them.
Annie.
This is Annie speaking. I agree completely with the general resource. I do want to mention 2 possible resources that may be beneficial for the employers to view. Michigan.gov/staywell. There are many resources there, and it's under the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. That's a good resource for employers. Also, we have a resource called Headspace. It's for mindful exercises and things like that. That's a good resource for people to take advantage of. Also, I wanted to mention that, I mean, I agree, you should not single out any employee. But I do want to mention, as a deaf person, you know, who to think about how I'm going to navigate communication access. That in itself is very, very stressful. That whole thought process, the assessing, and then I'm going to have to educate my employer about what I need. I'm going to have to educate my coworkers. That in itself is very stressful. And so it's important to also recognize that we have to connect with our peers. other individuals who may be experiencing the same situations. So getting that feedback, what are you doing? Trying to investigate other options. I think it's important that we need to think about other people that could be experiencing the same things that I am, so we're not feeling alone or isolated in that situation and trying to navigate this whole COVID-19 situation. We talk about, one thing we don't talk about is connecting with our colleagues, who may, again, be experiencing those same types of things.
Great, thanks, Annie. Jenny was next.
Thanks, Brian. Jenny Pite again from Michigan Rehab Services. Wonderful comments from my colleagues. Just wanted to add, I think for an employer, for a supervisor, a business that might not have an employee assistance program, or might be a smaller business. Annie hit on a great resource in terms of some of the internal within the state that's available to you at no cost. It's really promoting the self-care, right? For not only your employees and encouraging self-care, but also, to Annie's point, with yourself and with your peers, and how to make those connections. It reminds me, again, going back to kind of being creative in these times. And there are a lot of resources out there that, as an example, even for our own team, we looked at how are there ways that we can connect, and we did it, remotely, where we do a check-in once a week with one another. As a group, again, we're not isolating anybody. We're bringing everybody together once a week just to do a touch, especially at the very beginning when everything was happening. And now it's just the consistent communication that's just, so important. One of the other tools, one of our occupational therapists is a certified yoga instructor. So she provides, like Friday yoga at lunchtime, for us to be able to decompress and take advantage of her skill set and certification. So that's always appreciated. But again, I think it's going back to being creative and looking at different programs like mental health and mindfulness. And again, between, I think, MDHHS and MDCR, Civil Rights, Michigan Rehab Services, Bureau of Blind Services, we all have great programs that we can offer to businesses and your employees with respect to that.
Okay, Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC, and like what Annie and Jenny was saying, how I connect with my team, we do the maybe weekly check-ins, but one of the creative ways to make that connection is ever since we've been working from home, at least once a week, I go get a card, words of encouragement, thank you for your hard work during this pandemic, and they really appreciate that. They are still isolated in a sense because they're working at home. They're not able to interact with their peers, but they have said how this really makes them feel like they're still connected in a way, with their supervisor or with the office. So it's little easy things too that you can do. They may not need to see somebody EAP, but just making them feel comfortable and that showing that you care. We're all going through the same thing or some of the same issues right now.
Great, thank you. Kim.
I was going to share another idea, really simple. We did it yesterday, actually, after I got off yesterday's panel discussion, is that MDCR had a voluntary lunch and learn with a mental health professional, and I believe we got her from the Stay Well, Stay Home, Stay Well, Stay Safe website that MDHHS provides. And the mental health professional came on talking about such topics as isolation, depression, etc. So that's something that an employer could do. We did it in a Zoom meeting, and the mental health professional talked to the staff that participated about these subjects.
Excellent. Well, this is Brian speaking. So why don't I just to summarize, of course, yes, you can provide these types of services. You don't want to single out, or you shouldn't be singling out employees with disabilities. But to the extent you have those conversations, I really like the advice that was given yesterday, that asking questions like, how are you doing? Or is there anything that you need? And, you know, those types of general questions are great questions to ask to the whole staff. To the extent you're doing that, no problems at all. To the extent that you have some particular concerns that maybe an employee is struggling, if they're really, really struggling, then the fitness exam, of course, that's a whole different process. But even just a simple question, hey, how are you doing? What can we do to help make this better? Is something that, well, it sounds an awful lot like common sense. And this is one of those areas where I think really the law does kind of direct employers toward common sense type solutions. All right, well, let's move on to question number 6. Can employers lay off persons with disabilities due to business necessities? So, you know, we did a survey among our members just recently, just for a little bit of context here, and we asked our members what they were experiencing or what they expected to experience in terms of total sales. And we found that that there was an expectation that over this year that most businesses would experience significant reduction in total income coming into the business, and this naturally puts them in a scenario where layoffs are more likely. So this question of, can employers lay off persons with disabilities due to business necessities, is one that's very active, and frankly, it's one that employers are afraid to ask. Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC. So yes, unfortunately, during this pandemic, that they can lay off individuals with the disabilities. The only thing is, you don't want any disparate treatment in that process. Like, if you're going to do the layoffs, it can't be based on just one particular protected group, you know. So it has to be like a across the board type thing, so the person doesn't feel that you're doing this because of the disability. And then if one of these special rules is, if when they're offering those severance packages in exchange for it, you may want to go to the EEOC website, eeoc.gov, and look under what you should know. And it's question F1, and it will explain further what you need to do with those severance packages.
Okay. Anything more to offer from any of our other panelists before we move on? All right, very good. Well, question number 7, and after we get through question 7, we're going to open up the chat box and take questions from the audience. Many employers are looking to hire additional staff. What can employers do to create a more meaningful employment opportunity for persons with disabilities as businesses re-engage? I figured Jenny would want to take this one.
Thanks, Brian. This is Jenny Pyatt from Michigan Rehab Services. Am I that predictable? And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Bill Robinson, of course, too, representing, you know, state vocational rehabilitation, both the general program for Michigan Rehab and for Bureau of Blind Services for Bill, whom he represents. You know, I think it's worthy mentioning first that, you know, we have the pleasure of working with a very large population of talented individuals that come to us for services, and that, you know, sometimes it may be a barrier to employment. It may be, you know, various factors in terms of why they might be working with our agency. Could be due to a new onset in terms of an illness or an injury, or it's something acquired maybe later in life, and they're not sure in terms of maybe some accommodations, what that might look like. So between Bill's agency and Michigan Rehab Services, our agency, I mean, we're servicing well over 50,000 state of Michigan citizens, you know, a year. So, and ages as young as 14 to 102, and skill sets all across the board. So I just want folks to be aware in terms of some of the talent sourcing of where you can reach out to. You know, and as far as just, you know, going back really to the question itself, Brian, about how do you create that meaningful outreach, if you will, I think you have to be very intentional about your approach as far as, your diversity and inclusion platforms that you might have. Are you including disability, within that platform? Do you have a self-identification campaign? That's another way of creating a culture for individuals to raise their hands. Other things that come to mind too is with respect to on the recruitment side is also preparing, in terms of preparing your frontline managers, disability awareness training, etiquette training. And again, everyone on this panel are very knowledgeable with respect to that topic and how to make your employees, your current employees feel comfortable, but also new employees who want to work for you feel comfortable too. Other methods are internships, job shadowing, work experience opportunities, working with youth. We have both of our agencies work with the school system. So we have access to, again, kids as young as 14 through high school and college. So again, it's another method of doing that outreach. And again, it's really customized based on your needs and what you're needing at this time from a hiring perspective. Our agencies have experts. We have business relation consultants that actually work directly with business. We have occupational therapists and specialists, as well as Bill has vision specialists, Annie's team as well, that can address sometimes those scary questions as it relates to reasonable accommodation, and or just looking, what is your blueprint? What is your strategy? So we can work with you on that strategy. We don't want you to think that you have to come up with the answers, or that you're going to be on your own. This team here is here in it for the long haul. Everyone on this panel, so we're here to support you in that process. With that being said, I'm going to pass off to Bill Robinson, and Bill, you pick up what I left off or where I forgot something.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, and this is Bill Robinson speaking. I want to thank Jenny for being very comprehensive in that. And what I really want to say is that small business is very important to the disability community. We have had an incredible amount of successful job candidates placed into small business. So we really view small business not only as the engine of growth for re-engagement as the economy starts, because as we know, innovation and growth is a driver from small business, and small business is an important part of that community that does that. And as a former small business owner, prior to coming to the state, I just want to say that if you think about this in again, that interactive type process we've kind of talked about before, that's what the professionals at both MRS and BSBP engage in. There's that interactive process between the business, the job candidate, and also the professional working for BSBP or MRS or other state agencies that we partner with. And through that collaborative process, we really work to emphasize the skills and also to accentuate and enhance the ability of that person through accommodations to perform those essential job duties and to be a real valuable part of the human capital that small business needs to operate and bring profits to the bottom line. In my own experience, part of what this process involves is being disability ready. And so I think that there's a great opportunity to engage with us to understand what that means. I can tell you from my own personal experience, my company, when I experienced an accident that left me with a vision disability, was not disability ready. And they lost a great CFO that has, after that, started his own business and turned around a lot of businesses. So I just want to emphasize this is for the benefit of the company as a whole in a holistic standpoint, not just trying to say, oh, I want to hire a person with a disability. It's about hiring that talent that you need. And the people that we bring to you already have a whole list of credentials that are provided through our agencies in terms of extensive investment by our agencies in training, in job shadowing, job exploration, career exploration. So we're bringing a lot of that kind of screening that you already would have done to the table when you engage us for placing an individual with your business. So thanks, Jenny, and I'm gonna cut this off now. I could talk forever, but I know we have to get to questions at this point.
Okay, Annie next.
Hi, this is Annie speaking. I just wanted to make a really quick general comment. Jenny and Bill were, I mean, those are fantastic answers. They shared some excellent information. And those are both excellent resources. But I wanted to get just take a minute to acknowledge last month we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I just want to make sort of a general comment for the businesses that are now watching that I think it's important that this kind of question and this kind of conversation, understand that it's critical. Having that open mind, that willingness to think about inclusion and investment in the people who want to work, the people who can work and should be working. So I think we also need to continue this kind of conversation. We need to continue to increase awareness about this untapped talent out there, these people in the community that want to work, they want to invest in the workforce. So I hope that the businesses who are listening today, that are listening right now, really consider that, consider this something to look into. So as we open the economy, think about investing in the talent in this state. Thank you.
Excellent. Lolita.
Hi, Lolita Davis, EEOC. I just wanted to talk about, like, when you're going through that, the hiring and the onboarding of the individuals under the ADA, the employer may screen the applicants for COVID-19 symptoms if done post-offer for all applicants entering the same job, but again, not pre-offer. They may delay a start date for a job work site due to the applicant's COVID-19 symptoms, or they may even withdraw an offer due to an applicant's COVID-19 symptoms if the employer has that need for an immediate start date. And then one of the other things that I know we're talking a lot about the ADA, but under the Age Discrimination and Employment Act and Title VII, when we're dealing with pregnancy, that with the hiring, employers may not postpone start dates or withdraw job offers based on a person being of older age or pregnancy, even if that applicant is at a higher risk of severe illness if they contract COVID-19. So I just wanted to put that out there about the hiring and onboarding.
Excellent reminders. This is Brian Kelly speaking, and I appreciate as we open up the chat box here now for wider conversation and addressing questions, those answers, and also what a perfect place to end the first round here of questions for today, and talking about being intentional about hiring people with disabilities. People with disabilities tend to be creative and determined and have to persevere just to do the things that a lot of people take for granted. And those qualities, creativity, perseverance, determination, those are great qualities to have in your workforce. And so it makes sense to do it on purpose, not just be open to it, but to, on purpose, look to hire people with disabilities. There is so now the chat box is open. Just a reminder, of course, you can type in there. I can see people are already doing so. And if you're on the phone or using the audio option, click the raise your hand or *9. Remember, keep it friendly and appropriate when you're asking the questions. And if you need help on some of the Zoom accessibility issues, I think on do we have maybe on the next slide, or we already had on there, the zoom.us/accessibility, where you can learn about the accessibility options for interacting with Zoom. So, okay, let's start with some questions here. I'll scroll back to the beginning of the questions. Let's see here. Can a store owner tell a customer who will not wear a mask that, quote, I cannot allow you to enter, but you can make an order online per telephone or online or on the telephone, and complete your order. Your completed order will be brought to curbside. So it's kind of like, is that an acceptable accommodation to make, Kim?
Yes, that is an acceptable accommodation to make. The store owner has a policy per the executive order, actually. So it's state law and store policy not to allow patrons in without a mask. And yes, you can provide reasonable accommodations to that policy by allowing the person to make an order online, allowing a staff member to take the list from the customer and to do the shopping for the customer, and provide the customer with the groceries. Any reasonable accommodation outside of allowing the person to come into the store without the mask would be fine.
Okay, great. Next question here is when public health experts say that masks are essential, are face shields acceptable alternative accommodations for persons with disabilities? Who'd like to take this one? Annie?
This is Annie speaking. Yeah, let's see. So really, the CDC has made the recommendation for masks. Masks are required. That is how we protect our health and safety. So if you physically can't, like in the workplace, for example, if you physically can't stay 6 feet apart, and of course the employee, this goes for employees, coworkers that still need to have masks on. But if you can't stay 6 feet apart, a face shield is an alternative. We've seen some recommendations, just recommendations, that if the employee has a face shield on, they should still have the mask underneath the shield. So then if you're deaf, blind, or hard of hearing and you need to communicate with a coworker, you can then just move your mask to make your face more visible, but you still have the shield on and you can communicate that way. But I do want to stress that we still recommend that people wear the mask. So another possible accommodation could be clear masks.
Great, and you know, this is Brian speaking, and this was something that we specifically asked the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity to do the workplace safety rules, and while it can be an accommodation for a person with a disability, we should not look. We were told not to look at face shields as a universal alternative to face masks. So in other words, absent it being an accommodation for a person with a disability, it can't just be used for somebody who just doesn't want to wear a mask and I'd rather wear a face shield. The feedback that we got was that it's just not a one-for-one alternative. There are some cases where you're really close quarters where the face mask and the face shield are required, one on top of the other. But in terms of the disability accommodation, it can be an option for an accommodation for a disability. But remember, you need the interactive process. You don't decide for the person that they need that accommodation. It's important for that conversation to happen with the person with the disability for them to determine, yeah, that's a good alternative for me. Okay. Let's get to the next question here. Oh, I missed one here earlier. Are there tax incentives to hire a person with a disability? Jenny, could you take that one, please?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. This is Jenny from Michigan Rehab Services. And Bill Robinson, jump in too. I know you mentioned this yesterday. There are some tax incentives, particularly the work opportunity tax incentive that's available when hiring an individual with a disability. There's also architectural barrier removal tax incentives as well that you can get. Another one that's not quite as common that folks might not have heard of is second injury certification. Now that's specific to 4 medical conditions, specifically heart, diabetes, epilepsy, and back conditions. So again, that's a process you could contact either BSBP or MRS related to that second injury cert. And on those other tax barriers, again, this panel's, we can certainly assist you through that process. Bill, was there anything you wanted to add? Did I miss anything?
Yes, thanks, Jenny. The only thing I mentioned earlier is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and I think Brian had covered that also, that there's a tax credit available, and even though that's not for disability, it's for granting individuals leave that do have to quarantine or are sick because of COVID-19.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is, can an employee be terminated if they refuse to take a COVID test if they had been exposed? Bill?
So I was looking back at one of the executive orders that we talked about earlier, in Executive Order 2020-36 from the governor. And, I'm just going to read from this area, which talks about testing, and it talks about when a person is testing positive or displays one or more symptoms of COVID-19 should remain in their home or place of residence, even if they are otherwise permitted to leave under Executive Order 2020-21. And so the conditions are either 3 days have passed since their symptoms have resolved, and 7 days have passed since their symptoms first appeared, or since they were swabbed for the test that yielded the positive result. So that last condition is a either or. So again, it would indicate that you wouldn't necessarily need a test, but you would have to show that the symptoms had passed and isolate until then. However, if you want to speed that up, it says this section will cease to apply to anyone who, after showing symptoms, receives a negative COVID-19 test. So it's really in the employee's interest to probably get the test and to, make sure that, when they have a negative test, they communicate that, because then that isolation piece ceases to apply.
Thanks, Bill. And this is Brian Kelly talking. I thought maybe even just to drill in, I sense that this question, though, it might be in a case where an employee perhaps was traveling and, went to, the casinos in Vegas are open, went to Vegas last weekend, and now I'm back and I'm ready to come to work. And the employer says, I don't want you to come to work until you have a COVID-19 test. And if there's a refusal to have a test in that type of situation, we might not have that answer right here today on this panel. But Bill, you had something to add?
Yeah, I would I would think if you go to OSHA's website or my OSHA, I believe there is something, and I can't quote exactly, but there's something related to that where there's a reasonable expectation that the employee has to self-isolate in that case.
Okay, Jenny.
I would just add, Brian, that my understanding, because this is newer, that's a newer kind of quandary for a business. My understanding is it's really important to have policy in place. If that's the case, if you have employees, obviously it's summertime and employees are going on vacation, that's really important to have a policy in place in terms of practice that all employees understand that that rule applies to all of them, not just specific individuals, and that if it's a vacation or it's a hot spot that's been identified by the CDC, that, this would be a requirement. I believe that's one of the considerations. Another great resource to consider too, obviously, Brian, your organization is very resourceful on this particular topic. American Society of Employers is another resource too that has a lot of Q&A facts available too on their website that are very helpful, specifically related to this.
Yeah, great advice there, Jenny. The American Societies for Employers. Actually, we partner directly with them to answer these kinds of questions. And my understanding is that it's a matter for company policy. So set your policy, make sure your employees know what the policy is, and apply it evenly across all employees. So if it's required of your employees, make sure it's also required of you as the business owner as well. Okay, so the next question is, it was mentioned that the employer can lay off a person with a disability because of business necessity. Will the employer be required to hire that person back before hiring a new employee, even if the job responsibilities may be very similar? Lolita.
Lolita Davis, EEOC. Yes, they can lay off a person with a disability, but again, you just want to make sure you're not singling that individual out. If you are hiring someone, a new hire, to do the same job that the person with the disability did, then it may cause some problems, because why wouldn't you rehire the person with the disability? Their perception is, maybe you discriminated against me because of my disability. So you want to make sure you think it out. If you're able to hire someone, then why not look to those individuals that you did lay off and give them first consideration, just to avoid any legal issues at a later date.
Sure. Okay, Kim.
This is Kim speaking, and to piggyback on what Lolita said, look to your policies, and if you are in a union, look to your CBA with regards to layoff. And if you don't have a policy or practice, you might want to create one with regards to rehiring after layoff.
All right, thank you. This next question is actually one more to do, well, I guess I don't know if it's more to do with customers, but it could apply to customers or employees, I suppose. How do we fake cards about not being able to wear a mask? They claim you can't ask about their disabilities, so how do you verify this? Is there any recourse if I found out later that they were not truthful? Kim.
If an employee is requesting an accommodation under the ADA, for protections under the ADA, an employer can make reasonable inquiries in order to ascertain their duty, and that's part of engaging in the interactive process. So that would be what the employer would do.
And so just to see, and again, I don't know if everybody on this panel would be able to answer the question with respect to customers, but let's think of it in the customer context now. If somebody comes in and claims a disability, then in terms of inquiries and that sort of thing, would you still go down that road, or would you go straight to exploring accommodations? Kim?
When you say a customer, are we talking about, you're talking about if they need some kind of accommodation, right?
Let's say a customer comes to the door, they say, I can't wear a mask because I have a disability. At that point, what sort of inquiry can the business make of that customer?
So Michigan Department of Civil Rights gave out some guidance a couple of weeks ago with regards to that. If the customer is alleging they have a disability, the place of public accommodation can do one of several things. We use the example of, well, first of all, the governor's executive order states that if a person cannot medically tolerate a mask, which is different from the person having a disability, the place of public accommodation is required to make the inquiry, why are you not wearing a mask? And then if the person says they can't medically tolerate it, then the place of public accommodation has a couple of things they could do. They could let the person in, but of course, that puts other people and their staff at risk. Or they could provide that person an accommodation as if they are a person with a disability. And they could do, as I mentioned earlier, allow a staff member to do the shopping for the person or obtain the goods for the person. They could allow them to do carry out, depending on what services the place of public accommodation provides. But yes, they could provide them with an accommodation as if they were a person with a disability.
All right, very good. Well, seeing that we are running out of time here, we do have a commitment to follow up with those who have asked questions that we didn't yet get to, and so we appreciate everybody who participated. So some special thanks, first of all, to the panelists for your expertise and your willingness to share so generously with your time. Thank you to the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, Deputy Director Sean Egan, who provided opening remarks for both of our days here and has really been a very accessible person certainly to the business community as we're trying to comply with all the new rules. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, Toy Bogan and April Davidson. Thank you so much for the seamless way that you have helped with this communication, and also today's virtual sessions and captioning has been graciously provided by the Deaf Professional Arts Network, DPAN. Thank you for your excellent work there too. We had some great feedback yesterday about your services, and also a reminder that we have additional ADA 30 sessions coming up. michigan.gov/ADA30. You'll find resources from yesterday and today, and also some things coming up for the future. So also we'd invite you to share your story using hashtags, hashtag ADA30 and MIADA30. We'd invite you to share your stories online. We'll be keeping track of those and would be really, really interested to hear from you with that. And so thank you for attending. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for having an open mind. And one final reminder that everybody on this panel, the Small Business Association of Michigan and all the different agencies, please consider us to be resources to you as you move forward. You're not in this alone. When you have questions, there are experts out there that can help you answer those questions and get the best type of feedback, and also be problem solvers with you. Don't be afraid of agencies. View them as partners. Thank you so much, everybody, and good luck out there. I look forward to next time we see each other.